Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
If you haven't noticed yet, we're on YouTube now. On top of the audio version of every episode there, we're really looking forward to actually filming some more YouTube content. So make sure to check us out on YouTube and subscribe. If you want to support the Murder Diaries and listen ad-free for $2.99 a month, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Patreon. You can also search the Murder Diaries ad-free on Spotify.
This episode was recorded by our friends at Spotify Studios. Thanks so much. Welcome to the Murder Diaries. I'm Natalie.
And I'm Paige.
Sandra Nestle was a special young woman who was a bright spot in the lives of nearly everyone that knew her. Sandra, known as Sandy by her friends and family, was filled with energy and a love for life. She could generate the same kind of enthusiasm about a garage sale that she would about a trip taken to the Bahamas. Everything she did was some new adventure, and she wanted to share it with everyone. Caring, loving, and sensitive, Sandy was someone with whom you could rely on, always smiling and cheering up the people who needed it the most. Her stepfather said, if you knew Sandy for 5 minutes, she was your friend. But all it took was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And all of Sandra Nestle's energy, light, and love was snuffed out for good. This is her story.
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
Just prior to her murder, Sandra Nestle had reached a new precipice of personal growth and fulfillment. A college degree and a new life just in sight on the horizon. It hadn't been easy for her, though. In a way, Sandy had lived her life backwards, sacrificing her own childhood and an education for the 3 children she had at a very young age. But in the summer of 1983, at 32 years old, Sandy found herself just a few college credits away from earning the bachelor's degree she had been working so hard at for so long. The future was finally taking shape. Soon she would graduate, begin a career, and move herself and her kids out of her mother's house and into a place of their own. It had been a long, rocky road for Sandy. But for once, it seemed she'd finally shown up in the life she'd always dreamed of. Born on October 20th, 1950, to Rosie and Floyd Campbell, Sandy was one of 5 children, and as the third born, she was the middle kid. It wasn't long before Rosie and Floyd divorced, and Floyd quickly disappeared from the picture, having absolutely no relationship with his children. Rosie was later remarried to Sandy's stepdad, Ken, when Sandy was a teenager. Now, Ken was completely different than Floyd. He was a great father figure to Rosie's children and developed a close bond with Sandy. When Sandy was 13, she became pregnant with her first son, Bill. Even by 1963 standards, it's a young age for a girl to become a mother, but it was the situation in which Sandy found herself. And it would happen 2 more times with the same father. At 16, Sandy gave birth to her son, Greg, and 10 months later, her youngest boy, Chad. Still in her teens, Sandy was now a mother of 3. She tried to make things work with the father, even marrying him, but it didn't last long and the 2 parted ways.
She was a teenage mom. She had 3 boys by the time she was 18, might have been 17.
That's Greg Nestle, Sandy's middle son. He was gracious enough to give us an exclusive interview for this episode. Being a single mom didn't stand in the way of Sandy's commitment to her children. She was a great mom, and Greg had a lot to say about that when we spoke to him.
Mom was, you always hear the stories about, a firecracker, tough and strong, loving. Every one of those descriptors fit Mom. She wasn't even 5 foot tall, just itty bitty.
Sandy may have been small in stature, but oh, she was feisty. Greg talked to us about his mother's unbreakable love and dedication for her boys, recalling that she was there for them through the good times and the bad.
She was the mom that was at every game. She was the mom that was, every performance, whatever it was. She was your biggest cheerleader, and she would be your biggest correctional officer too. When when 3 boys, we had quite a share of corrections, but just loved her boys to the moon. I don't know how else to explain her. Just loved life and loved to be a part of anything that we were involved in.
And to this day, Greg still has special memories of Sandy. He can still see her clearly in his mind's eye.
My favorite memory is probably just her smile. I mean, seen it a million times, but I, miss that so much. She could light up a room. Her presence was always bigger than her body.
Life as a teen mom came with obvious challenges, and when the marriage to the biological father of her boys didn't work out, Sandy was on her own to raise the children and somehow get her high school graduate equivalency degree in the process. Sandy's mom and stepdad, Rosie and Ken, were there to provide additional support for Sandy and the boys, pitching in financially when they could.
Grandma and Grandpa helped them out so much. They told me later on in life, as I was trying to learn more and more, they would help her because she was it was a bad situation with our natural father. He wasn't a very kind person.
But eventually, Sandy met and married her second husband, Al Nestle. She was 21 years old. While the marriage to Al would only last a few years, the split between Sandy and Al was an amicable one, and Al continued to care for Sandy's sons. The boys were close to Al. In fact, Greg sees Al as his father and eventually adopted Al's last name, changing it from Alward to Nestle. The brothers eventually moved in with Al. He had the space and the rooms available for the boys to live comfortably, and Sandy moved in with her mother. It was about this time that Sandy began to focus on college. Education was important to her, and a college degree could mean the fresh start that she and her boys needed. So she enrolled in Alma College, a small Presbyterian liberal arts college in Alma, Michigan. It was less than 5 miles from where she was staying with her mom.
She didn't start school till I think it was around 29. So and then she put such an emphasis on it that and wanted all 3 of us boys to go to school. That was her wish.
And in true Sandy fashion, someone whose superpower was pinching every penny to make them go farther. She was able to negotiate the price of her tuition, something about his mom that Greg is still impressed by.
And loved to barter. Well, there was a story going around that Alma College, she actually got them to reduce their tuition for her to attend. And, that's kind of unheard of, but that was kind of who she was. She wasn't afraid to take on the fight and argue and try to get something cheaper.
So the plan was set. The boys would live with their stepfather, Al, and Sandy would stay with her mother and dig into her schoolwork, her sights set on the ultimate goal of a college degree. And at that, she worked hard. She completed her coursework and she was credits away from graduating with a degree in education.
She was in her last semester and she was going to become a teacher.
And then the unimaginable happened.
Sandy loved to jog. It was her release, her daily fitness routine. She would run along West Shepherd, a lonesome rural road in Midland County's Jasper Township, near where Rosie and Ken lived in St. Louis, Michigan. And it was on June 21st, 1983, the day of her murder, that Sandy told her mom that the mile-long stretch of West Shepherd Road made her nervous. It was heavily wooded with no houses, And she made a promise to herself and her mom that this would be the last time she jogged along the route, because next time, she would find a safer place for her cardio. Now, it's important to note that it's likely Sandy had something else on her mind that fateful evening. June 21st marked the day that her divorce from Al Nestle became official. Again, she and Al had a peaceful and polite post-marriage relationship. Things were civil enough between them that she was fine to let the boys live with him. But making things official with the divorce might have been another indication for Sandy that the next chapter of her life was beginning. A fresh start with a college degree, and eventually she and her boys all living under the same roof again. Things definitely seemed to be looking up. But when she didn't return from her jog on time that evening, Sandy's mom experienced her own wave of intuition and unease. It wasn't long before Rosie reached out to the Midland County Sheriff's Department to let them know she had a bad feeling about her daughter. Officers from the sheriff's office and the Michigan State Police were dispatched, along with a canine officer. And Rosie sent word to the family that Sandy was missing. And the search began. Greg Nestle remembers that night well.
We were at home in Elma, Michigan, and Dad came and got us, and it was dark. It was late. I don't remember what time. And he said that your mom's missing. We're going to look for her. So we drove to St. Louis, about maybe 15, 20 minutes to get there.
Rosie tried to keep a brave face that night. She even provided refreshments for the police officers who'd responded. But that intuition, that terrible gut feeling, was still sounding alarm bells, telling Rosie that something wasn't right, that her daughter was in danger. Everyone hoped for the best. Maybe there was a simple explanation why Sandy hadn't come home.
We're all hopeful, that mom had just ran into somebody and jumped in the car and, was hanging out with them. But Grandma kept swearing up and down, no, she didn't. I know she didn't because she had ice cream on her shirt. Ice cream had dripped on it. And, Mom would never go out with that ice cream on her. She would have came back here, cleaned up, and then went back out with a friend or friends, whoever, So Grandma was pretty animate that didn't happen and that something else was amiss.
The night of June 21st, 1983 was most assuredly the longest night of Rosie's life. She was surrounded by her husband, her grandsons, the police, and search volunteers. But her daughter remained missing. Every hour and minute that ticked by without Sandy at home made the outlook seem that much more desperate. Eventually, the search was called off for the night with a plan to resume at first light. Greg told us about searching for his mother the next morning.
We ended up all staying at Grandma's house that night. And we woke up the next morning and the police were starting to look. And we were allowed to look where they'd already looked. So we were just kind of following them around.
Greg and his brothers, along with other volunteers, combed the area, searching ditches, cornfields, a barn, a granary, anywhere their mother might possibly be. And then the search team got word to head back to Rosie's house. Sandy had been found.
So we went back to Grandma's house, and there was a police officer there that told us that they found the body, they found Mom, and she was dead. I just remember everybody collapsing.
The body of Sandra Nestle had been discovered, found face down in a ditch, submerged in a shallow pool of water.
Police knew almost immediately that they were dealing with a homicide. She didn't trip and fall and hit her head in some random tragic accident. Sandy had clearly been placed in the drainage ditch by somebody. Her missing persons case was suddenly upgraded to a murder investigation.
Authorities got to work gathering evidence and conducting interviews with family, friends, and neighbors. Soon they had a lead, and a good one.
Hey everyone, it is Ryan Seacrest here. Ready to heat up your summer vacation? Get ready, things are about to get sizzling at Chumba Casino. Your summer getting a whole lot hotter with a special daily login bonus waiting just for you. So Sign up now for Reels of Fun and Reels of Prizes right here at Chumba Casino with yours truly. Join me at ChumbaCasino.com and dive into a summer of social casino fun.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
An interviewee remembered seeing someone in the area at the time of Sandy's murder, a young man on a bicycle. The witness reported seeing this person following Sandra and remembered the details of the bike he was riding. This was enough to lead authorities to Brian Kelly Granger, a 17-year-old neighbor of Rosie and Ken. And ironically, the Granger family lived a little more than a mile away in a home rented to them by none other than Sandy's stepfather, Ken. On June 23rd, just 2 days after she was reported missing, police interviewed Granger, and then they took him into custody. Soon, Brian's disturbing criminal background was revealed. A shocking history of sexual assault by someone who wasn't even yet a legal adult himself. For example, in 1981, when he was just 15 years old, Brian was found guilty of separate incidents for indecent exposure. He was also found guilty of sexual molestation, which included a 7-year-old victim. Brian was placed at Boysville Detention Center in Monroe, Michigan, where he lived out his 15-month sentence. He was then transferred to a halfway house for another handful of months before being released. Shockingly, Brian Granger had been back home for less than a week when Sandy was murdered. As police interviewed him, it didn't take long before Brian started talking about what happened the evening she went missing, when he made contact with her while she was running on West Shepherd Road. Brian's initial story is that he just wanted to talk to her. But when he pulled up next to her on his bike, he said that Sandy immediately scratched him, pushed him to the ground, and began to scream. Granger says he was angered by this, so he lunged at her and covered her mouth until she was unconscious. Brian said he thought he'd killed her, so it was then that he decided to remove her clothing and have sex with her. This plan was interrupted by a passing motorist, and Granger left her in a ditch. And that was his story, that the whole ordeal was unintentional.
Greg remembers his stepfather, Ken, taking it hard, knowing that he had unwittingly allowed Brian to enter their lives by renting a home to Brian's family.
He had just gotten out of juvenile detention maybe 7 days before, 6 days, something like that. So when Grandpa rented the house, it would have been the younger kids that would have been there. He came into the picture, that after he was released. So I know it hit Grandpa really hard. He ended up going down and, obviously he evicted him or asked him to leave, whatever he did. And then he bulldozed the house and just tore it down.
Granger was charged with Sandy's murder, and the case went to bench trial in December of 1983. And just like the police who interviewed him, the judge in the case saw through Brian's flimsy version of his encounter with Sandy, that it was impulsive and she died accidentally. The investigation revealed that circumstances of the crime showed premeditation. Granger continued to assault Sandy after she was unconscious, ignoring the opportunity to stop and reconsider his actions. Physical evidence included the presence of semen along with injuries to her buttocks, as well as the fact that she was stripped naked. Brian's history and escalation of sexual offenses also played into the court's decision. Brian Granger was an individual who proved he was a sexual deviant, who had preyed upon people numerous times. And he did it again on the evening that he encountered Sandra Nestle jogging on West Shepherd Road. Brian Granger saw Sandy, followed her on his bike to a more isolated part of Shepherd Road, and then attacked her. He strangled her into unconsciousness, removed her clothing, and sexually assaulted her. Afterwards, he left her face down in a partially filled drainage ditch and then covered her body with vegetation as she drowned. During sentencing, the judge in the case said that Brian intended to kill Sandra, and that he carried her to a spot and placed her so that she would die of drowning to hide his guilt in attempted commission or commission of criminal sexual conduct. Because of the strength of the case, the circumstances of the crime, Granger's juvenile record, and the fact that he confessed to killing Sandy, Granger was quickly found guilty of felony murder of Sandra Nestle and subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, as required under Michigan law at the time. Sandy's boys didn't attend the trial, but Greg recalls that it was his aunt who represented the family at court during the proceedings.
No, we did not attend. My Aunt Jeannie did. And she actually attended the second hearing too, and probably spoke on our behalf, I think. I don't know. The only thing I really remember about the trial was Jeannie telling us that, he's going away. He's going to be gone for his whole life. So you don't have to worry about it.
Despite numerous appeals and attempts to commute his sentence over the years, Granger's conviction and sentence were upheld time and again. And as recent as 2019, a sentencing review hearing was held that included a spectrum of witnesses, including prison officials, family members of both Granger and Sandy, as well as a brain development specialist and a psychologist.
It was during this hearing that the court took a closer look at Granger's home life. His family members spoke of a childhood and home environment that was rife with poverty, physical abuse, and traumatic experiences. We asked Greg what he knew about the man who murdered his mother.
It's really all I know is what I've read in those court documents, talking about, that his dad once threw him up against a wall or something, and he was substance abuse challenges. And, I get it, but I don't. The three boys, we had it a little rough too, and we didn't turn out that way. So I don't buy half of what the court says in reference to I buy what the one judge said when he upheld the life sentence. He had multiple times to stop what he was doing, and he didn't.
But Brian Granger caught a break in 2022, and the Michigan State Appeals Court ordered a Midland County judge to reduce Granger's sentence. He's set for resentencing on August 1st of this year, 2024. And after spending more than 40 years behind bars, he could possibly walk free. "We are disappointed," said Midland County Prosecutor J.D. Brooks. He continued, "The circumstances were horrific, and the victim's family has to live with it over and over again."
I think it's just a horrible law. I don't understand why they do it to the victims. I don't understand why they don't just start it effective now. I'm sorry that he's locked up for his entire life, but he's still living and apparently doing well, according to the warden. I would love for the original sentence to be upheld. I mean, him getting out, I won't bring my mom back, but more him staying in won't bring my mom back either. But you murdered somebody, you raped somebody, you have other sexual charges. At what point, do we say this? I just think he should die in prison. That's what I think.
As tragic as Sandra Nestle's brutal rape and murder was, her boys lost more than their mother on that dark day in June of 1983. They lost their family unit. And the future that Sandy was working so painstakingly hard to create for them. After her death, Sandy's three boys would never live under the same roof again. The oldest, Bill, left for college soon after. Greg went to live with his biological father, and the youngest, Chad, moved in with his uncle Sandy's brother. After Sandy was taken from them, the boys' lives were in a perpetual state of imbalance and instability. Greg told us that things were never the same after his mom died.
From the time that happened, we haven't been under the same roof, all three of us. I can't think of any time in the last, whatever it is, 40 years. Bill, Chad, and I mean, there's not one of us doesn't have friends that are closer than we are. I have friends that are closer than either one of my brothers, which is sad.
For a while, Greg and his younger brother Chad lived with their biological father, Art. It was a time marked by uncertainty, violence, and dysfunction, Nothing like their lives before their mother was murdered.
Art was an alcoholic. He was a drug addict. He was abuser. I mean, you name it. That was his kind of thing. We went from a very comfortable lifestyle, very comfortable, where we never worried for anything. We just didn't get all our wants, right? But all of our, everything we needed was always provided. Down to a place that, with Art, that was, the house was half finished, cold in the winter. Oh my God, it was cold. And you had to go downstairs to dress by the heater,
Today, the three brothers live in 3 different states. The oldest, Bill, has settled in Minnesota. Chad, the youngest, still lives in Alma, Michigan, the place where his mom was murdered. And Greg has a family in Texas, which is another heartbreaking chapter to the story of Sandy's death. The extended family she would never get to meet. She would have been a grandmother many, many times over by now.
Mom never met. So she never got to see her grandbabies, which, she was a young mom. She would have had a lot of time with her grandbabies that was robbed. And then she won't, see their, she would have great grandbabies now. I have 5 or 4. I have 4 grandbabies and 1 more on the way.
And now all Greg and his brothers can do is sit and wait as August of 2024 draws nearer and nearer on the calendar, when the man that violently murdered their mother may have a good chance of walking the streets again. And Greg does worry about this a lot. He's seen firsthand the extent of damage that Brian Granger has caused to the lives of others.
I hope that he doesn't ruin somebody else's lives, because as us 3 boys, we talk, but if we don't talk for 2 years, that's not uncommon.
If she were still with us today, Sandra Nestle would be in her mid-70s, and there's no doubt that she would have kept a tight-knit relationship with her boys and would be doting on her grandchildren as much as possible. From what we've learned about her while researching this episode, Sandy was one of a kind. So much so that in the decades after she died, her boys still took cues from the examples and life lessons she left behind. I talked to Greg about this, what impact his mother had on the lives of he and his brothers as they grew older. He had this to say.
I told you that the education was very important to her, and she actually set up her will based on us going to college. And I didn't make it. Bill and Chad did great, made it straight through. I did not. I started at about the same story she had when I was 30, or back in at 30. Well, she originally attended Central Michigan University. Then she transferred to Elma College right there in our town where we live. And Bill actually transferred from up north to Elma College. And so his diploma came from Elma College, same as Mom. And when I was stationed in Hawaii as my last duty station, I had an opportunity to do my master's with Central Michigan University. So I did that. And then I was able to take both diplomas, my undergrad and my graduate, to the grade. So Mom had all 3 boys finish college.
And even though Sandy herself was just a few credits shy of graduating from Alma College at the time of her death, in the end, her dream of an education was fully realized posthumously.
They gave Mom the honorary degree, and she was going to become a teacher. And, I'm now a principal at the middle school.
Sandy's life may have been heartlessly stolen from her family, but the one thing that Brian Kelly Granger didn't do, and will never be able to do, is erase the memories that Greg and his brothers have of their mother. Bill, Greg, and Chad didn't realize it at the time, but Sandy was instilling in them an important lesson of what hard work and planning looks like. How a single mom can triumph over adversity and do everything in her power to provide a life and a future for the children she loved so very much. It wasn't a perfect situation. But if anyone was making the best of a difficult one, it was Sandra Nestle.
was very animate. And I know I look back on it now, and at 13, obviously you don't know anything. I deal with them all day here. But she had a hard life by being pregnant at 13 and marrying Art and having 2 more kids, just in a really rough relationship. And she always took care of us boys. She was always there, and then she started telling us about college and why it's important, and it stuck.
I imagine she would be so proud to see her boys all have graduated and have been successful.
I think she would be. Yeah.
Thanks again to our friends at Spotify for allowing us to record at their studio in LA.
Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and all of our other socials at the Murder Diaries Pod. And until then,
Stay safe.
bye.
Hey there, it is Ryan Seacrest with you. Do you want to make this summer unforgettable? Join me at Chumba Casino. It's this summer's hottest online destination. They are rolling out the red carpet with an amazing welcome offer just for you. So don't wait. Dive in now and play hundreds of social casino games for free. Your chance to redeem real prizes is just a spin away. Care to join me?
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.